see. Hare Krishna. So this evening I'm going to read Bhagavad Gita chapter 9, text 2, where Krishna says, rāja-vidyā, rāja-guhyaṁ, pavitram idam uttamam, pratyakṣāvagamaṁ, dharmyam, su-sukhaṁ, kartum, avyayam. Actually, I'll read the previous verse also because it's related. It's all related. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, idam tu te guhyatamam, pratyakṣāmi anasuyave, jnanam vijnana sahitam, yagyatva mokshasya shubhat. So, Prabhupada translates this. This is chapter 9, text 1 of Bhagavad Gita. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, my dear Arjuna, because you are never envious of me, I shall impart to you this most confidential knowledge and realization, knowing which you shall be relieved of the miseries of material existence. So, here, and elsewhere, of course, but here too, Krishna describes Arjuna's qualification to hear Bhagavad Gita. In other words, Krishna did not simply choose some man on the street at random to hear Bhagavad Gita. It wasn't cold calling. Krishna describes in various places why he chose Arjuna. And the point is clear here. Bhagavad Gita, so the speaker is Bhagavan Sri Krishna, and yeah, it's all right. So in order to understand the Gita, we have to know not only who Krishna is, we also have to know who Arjuna is. Because Arjuna understood Bhagavad Gita. At the end, Arjuna said that Smriti Labdha, I've regained my memory. I remember who I really am. Stitosmi, I'm properly situated. Karishe vachanantava, I will carry out your order. So if we want to understand the Bhagavad Gita, in a sense, we first have to understand Arjuna. Because Arjuna is the model of a person who did understand Bhagavad Gita. And it's also interesting that in the beginning, Arjuna had sort of temporarily forgot why he should join the Hare Krishna movement. Because the Bhagavad Gita begins with Arjuna not hearing from Krishna, but trying to explain to Krishna what he should do, what he should not do, and so on. And to get the full impact of Arjuna's statements, which are shocking. In fact, at first, Krishna was surprised and said, are you serious, Arjuna? And apparently he was. Better never than later. So if you know Mahabharata, if you know the story, the history, itihasa, who Arjuna actually is, and what his previous activities are, it's easy to see why Krishna was so surprised, incredulous, to see Arjuna saying that he would not fight. And especially because he had sentiments for people who were basically bad people. But they were his relatives. As we know in this material world, even if you have relatives who are bad persons, you still have to deal with them. Everyone has experience of this. So in chapter 4, Krishna told Arjuna, Bhaktosi me sakha, you are my devotee, you are my friend, iti rahasyam uttamam. And therefore you can understand something which is ordinarily difficult to understand, rahasyam. The word rahasyam in Sanskrit is a synonym of guhyam. Something which is mysterious, something which is confidential, something which everyone can't understand. It's, in a sense, it's also somewhat like we would say today, advanced knowledge. Knowledge is like a pyramid. So let's say someone has taken a high school course in physics. So, hundreds of millions of people have taken a high school course in physics. And comparatively much fewer persons have taken a college course, an undergraduate, introductory course in physics. And then people who have taken more advanced courses, a master's degree, a doctorate, a postdoctoral study. And so the higher you go in terms of knowledge, the fewer people there are. And when you come to the very advanced state of knowledge, there are very few people indeed. And so this idea of advanced knowledge and advanced understanding, which most people don't have, is similar to what Krishna means when he talks about guhyam, which is comes from the Sanskrit root gu, which means to conceal or to hide. For example, guha in Sanskrit means a cave, a place where something is hidden away in a cave. And so the word guhyam, and Krishna uses this word often, uttamam, the most guhya, the most confidential, and so on, guhyataram, guhyataram. I'm speaking knowledge which is more confidential than confidential. So I think to understand, it's not just like in high school or elementary school where the kids tell each other secrets and whisper each other's ears. It's not that Krishna is whispering into Arjuna's ear, but the idea is that because it is advanced knowledge, most people don't understand it. Whatever field you are in, if you give an advanced talk on it to an average audience, most of them won't understand what you're talking about, whether it's engineering or medicine or AI, whatever it is. So, isn't it? Practical. So, Krishna says, this is guhyattamam, the most advanced, or the most confidential. And he says, pratyakṣāmi, I shall teach it, I shall explain it, in the future tense, anasuyave, which means to you because you are not envious. And so this is the basic problem. This is the basic problem. It's not that we don't want there to be a God, we just want to be that person. So if someone says, you're the greatest, we don't object. But if someone says, God is the greatest, well, maybe there's a God. So, there also is what I call, there is philosophical atheism, and then there's psychological atheism. Philosophical atheism means someone says, my philosophy is there's no God, which is kind of stupid. As philosophy, not that it's stupid because there really is a God, it's just bad philosophy. Because if there's no God, then no one knows everything. If no one knows everything, no one knows that there's a God. So the only way you could know that there's no God is if you were God. And then, in that case, it wouldn't be true that there's no God. So, anyway, the atheists are not the sharpest tools in the toolbox. Although now on YouTube, they're kind of making a living, one thing I've noticed, if you watch some of these debates with atheists, if you can sit through it, that they never do serious philosophy. They never really do serious, they just sort of boldly claim that, blah, blah, blah. And of course, the usual argument they give is that, because it's the only argument really they have in their arsenal, is that if there was a God who's sort of a typical God, namely, can I see your ticket? See where you? Okay. Because the typical description of God is that God is omniscient, omnipotent, and omnibenevolent, what philosophers sometimes call a triple O God. In other words, God knows everything, all-knowing. English, by the way, is composed mostly of words from Latin and most from Germanic languages. So that's the Latin. That's sort of like pure Latin. Omnipotent, omnibenevolent, and omnipotent, omnipotent. And then the Germanic way to say that would be all good, all-knowing, and so on. All strong, which is sort of German. Anyway, enough linguistics. So they say if there was a God who knows everything, God knows there's a lot of injustice in the world, that innocent people suffer, that bad things happen to good people. If God is all kind, all merciful, then he wants to help those people. He wants to stop the injustice. In fact, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, dharma sangstapanarthaya, I come to establish justice. And then, if God is all-powerful, he not only knows about evil, he not only wants to correct it, he has the power to do so. But when you look around, the evil goes on, the injustice goes on. Therefore, they think they think this is a kind of philosophical checkmate, that there cannot be a God who's all good, all-knowing, and all-strong. So this argument is something like if you go shopping and something looks good, in the package, but then when you get home and open it, it's not what you thought, like the tomatoes are actually rotten. And so I'll explain to you, because this is the main argument of the atheists, I'll explain what the problem is with this argument philosophically. And that is, first of all, this argument is especially problematic for people from Middle Eastern religions, like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, who are not aware of karma and reincarnation. It was not so much a problem for people like the Greco-Roman religions, the religions from India, that knew that there is such a thing. Plato talks about reincarnation, and many other great thinkers talk about reincarnation. Plotinus, the great Roman philosopher, and so on. So let's think about this. And I think the way to get at this atheist argument is to pose a question. And the question would be, in order for someone to be considered a perfect moral agent in philosophy doesn't mean the person who sells you insurance. Agent in philosophy means someone who is enough conscious to make decisions and do things intentionally. For example, let's say you're walking down the street and you're in a bad mood and you push someone and that person falls down. So you've committed a criminal act because you acted as an agent. You did it willfully. You did it intentionally. Let's say you're walking down the same street and someone pushes you and you fall into another person and that person falls down. You did not act as an agent in the philosophical sense. In other words, you did not act intentionally. Something was done to you rather than you choosing to do something. So when we speak of a moral agent is a person who chooses to do things that are good or bad. By moral here, we're talking about, for example, let's say you run real fast. That's not a moral act. Let's say you just robbed a bank and you're running real fast. Then it's illegal because you're trying to evade the law. Or let's say you're running real fast because you're a doctor and some person just collapsed on the sidewalk and you're trying to save their life. So the act of running, if you say John ran or Mr. Patel ran, that's not morally good or bad. But if you have more information why they're running, then you know. So to be a moral agent is someone who has enough consciousness, enough understanding to be morally responsible for what they do. So, for example, a young child is not a moral agent. We read sometimes some horrible things where, little Johnny picked up daddy's gun and shot his sister, little Susie or something. So, obviously, you cannot prosecute a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old as a criminal because they are not considered to have enough intelligence to act as moral agents. So now, if we take this language, a moral agent, what does it mean to be a perfect moral agent? What does it mean to act in such a way so that everything you do is morally good? And if we say a perfect moral agent, let's say not only is it good what you did, but it's the best possible thing you could have done. Let's say, for example, someone is starving in front of you and you put down the window of your car and throw them an apple, when actually in the back of your car you have lots of food because you're coming from a Hare Krishna temple. So we can say that was a morally good act that you gave a starving person food, but it wasn't a perfect moral act because you could have done better. So now we get to the real topic here. How can one argue for or against the proposition that God is a perfect moral agent? Because if God is a perfect moral agent, then somehow the fact that there is suffering and injustice in the world is not an argument against God. There must be some way in which there can be injustice and suffering in the world, which there is, and yet God is still a perfect moral agent, even though he has the knowledge of the suffering, and he has the power to change it, and he has the goodwill to relieve suffering. So here's basically the refutation of that atheist argument. That costs extra, by the way. So everyone, go to PayPal on your phone right now. Okay, so here's, that was a joke. You never know in the Hare Krishna temple. Is he serious? So, we have examples in this world that someone who has the best intention toward another person intentionally causes that other person suffering or allows that person to suffer. An example of that is when you take your child to the dentist. Now, when you take your child to the dentist, and the dentist and the child, despite the best efforts of the dentist, children, it's still, it can be a little painful, they can cry and so on. So someone can say you're a terrible parent because you took your child to the dentist. But of course the answer is that you intentionally subjected your child, whom you love, to suffering in order to prevent a much greater suffering. And so that's an example. No one accuses parents of being immoral or bad parents when they take their children to doctors or dentists and so on, or when they make their children go to school, even though, let's say, the child doesn't want to go to school. So that's a relevant example, that if someone either allows or causes suffering to another person, it must be the case that it's done for the greatest good of that person, and there was not a less painful way to achieve that good, a necessary good. So then if we apply that to God, the question will be, could God bring about the same good, or could God, let's say, just immediately relieve all the suffering of the world and without causing a greater evil? Like a parent that says, well, I don't want my child to suffer, so my child is never going to go to a dentist. Obviously, that's stupid. So what greater evil is Krishna preventing by allowing certain injustice and suffering to go on in the world? Now, first, I'm going to explain what perhaps the greatest attempt by a Christian philosopher is to answer this. And then I'll explain why that answer ultimately fails, whereas an answer from Krishna consciousness does not fail. So probably the most effective answer from the Christian side, coming from a very renowned contemporary philosopher, renowned as a philosopher in general, not just as a philosopher of Christianity. In other words, there's a difference. You can be a philosopher, let's say you can do what is called philosophical theology, which means you're basically teaching the doctrine of some religion, but you try to do it philosophically. And then there is what is called philosophy of religion, where you're doing philosophy about a particular claim of a religion. Anyway, they're almost the same thing. So don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. You won't be tested on that distinction. So his argument was basically this. First of all, he accepted the general point that allowing some evil or allowing some suffering in the world is justified if it eliminates or prevents a greater evil. And he said that the greater evil, that if God did not allow people to do bad things to other people, the greater evil would be God would have to remove people's free will. And taking away the free will of souls would be a greater evil. And in terms of atheist philosophers, they had to admit that the general point that removing a greater evil would justify creating some kind of bad thing to happen. But here's why the argument from our point of view ultimately fails. It ultimately fails because if God allows people to exercise their free will, love it when people come in and out. If God allows people to exercise their free will, so why don't you get settled and then I'll continue? We okay? If God allows people to exercise their free will and do bad things, God could allow them to exercise that free will, but only against people who had that punishment coming. In other words, karma. So Krishna is kind of like a matchmaker. Okay, you want to abuse someone, this person has bad karma, so John, Fred, John. And then, now, the reason why this very good argument is not available to Christians or Muslims is because they don't understand karma or they don't accept karma. Now, if you say there is no karma, you get one life, that creates yet another philosophical problem for them. And that is, let's say, for example, you have a child and you love your child, but you tell your child, one strike, you're out. That if you do anything wrong, or I'll give you up until maybe like 20. And by 20 years, if you don't behave perfectly, then I'm going to just torture you forever. In other words, what possible reason could God have not to give people more chances? What possible good could be served by not allowing them to keep trying? In fact, what we know is, for example, if you study film writing scripts for films, or novel writing, like professional course, one thing you learn is that when you're developing characters, or let's say someone is the hero of a particular story, where the hero at first typically is reluctant, think Luke Skywalker, I don't want to be a Jedi Knight, or think Arjuna, I don't want to fight. So this is the 12-step hero's journey. So typically the hero at first is reluctant and then finally is convinced, no, you have to go forth. And then the hero conquers all and, whatever has to be saved is saved. and so on. But one thing you learn if you're studying script writing or novel writing is that people don't change that much. Like, let's say Arjuna. Arjuna basically had one problem. He didn't want to fight. He was too attached to his family. But then he did. He overcame that one problem. But he was still Arjuna. So from God's point of view, why, for what possible reason, for what possible good would you give people only one chance? After all, since eternity is infinite time, one human lifetime is infinitesimally small. It's like you tell your child, okay, I'll give you exactly 15 seconds to become a perfect moral agent. And if that doesn't happen, terrible thing, I'm going to toss you into the oven. So this kind of bizarre theology stands in sharp contrast to the more advanced knowledge we find in Vedic literature. So, therefore, if God gives us unlimited chances, then, and there are so many people in all these worlds, then if someone does something bad and has some bad coming to them, that person will be matched up with someone who has evil intent. In that way, everyone preserves their free will, and no one gets what they don't deserve. It's not that by preserving one good, namely free will, that there's this horrible injustice where innocent people suffer. And so it's actually, this, by the way, is called theodicy. Theos in Greek means God, and dike in Greek means justice, the justice of God. Is God just? Is God just? Is there justice in God's creation? So this is a perennial philosophical issue. And actually, it's only when you come to the more advanced theologies, especially Bhagavad Gita, that it can be shown philosophically that the evil in the world does not discredit God as a perfect moral agent. So I hope you all understood that. We actually need to be, maybe I'll make this point, because it wouldn't be a perfect lecture if I didn't harass you about something. And that is, when Prabhupada first planned to come to the West, and then when he came to the West, when he founded ISKCON, and even after that in his mission, he gave this anatomical metaphor. He used to always say that just as there is a head on the body and the brain, he said, just because the brain doesn't sweat, it doesn't mean it's not working. And so the idea that we can compare society to a body, this goes all the way back to the Rig Veda. This goes all the way back to the oldest Sanskrit literature, the Rig Veda, where it said that the Brahmanas are the head of the Virat Rupa, of the cosmic form of God. The Brahmins are the head, the Kshatriyas are the arms that protect and get things done. The Vaishyas are the belly that provides nourishment to the body, and the legs are the Shudras that sort of carry things physically. So if you have a headless body, watch out. I mean, imagine a body that has no head but is still alive somehow. It's just, it's a disaster. So Prabhupada said that the modern society is a headless body because there's no legitimate, there's no qualified Brahmana class. And, as far as India, we know the problems with the Brahmin class in India. So, therefore, Prabhupada said he was coming to put the head on the society. So what does that mean? It doesn't just mean the International Society for Pujaris, although they are necessary. Because, as Prabhupada explained, that the ultimate duty of a Brahmin is not simply to perform rituals, which are good. It's not that they're useless. They're very good. They're necessary. But they're not the essence. Because you can come to this temple and worship the deity, but if you don't understand what the deity really is, if you don't understand what the deity wants you to do in your life, then it's simply basically covering your asana. It's just okay, I come and worship the deity, and hopefully that will protect me from and my family from bad things and will make me eligible for good things. So I'll give a donation, I'll worship the deity, and hopefully I'll get all kinds of benefits and avoid all kinds of problems. So that's not really philosophical. And what we find is throughout human history that most people that belong to a certain religion, whether it's Hinduism or Christianity or polytheisms, if you look at the history of religion around the world, most people are not philosophers. Most people are not worshiping God because they actually know what they're doing. It's almost like for the same reason you put on your seatbelt on a flight, or if the doctor tells you to stop smoking. In fact, this reality that most people do not approach God because they actually know what they're doing is found in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna himself says this. He says, Chaturvidha bhajante mang. 4 groups of people worship me. Chaturvidha bhajante mang jana, people, sukritina, who are basically good people that do good things. Jana sukritino Arjuna. So they're all good because at least they came to God. And Krishna says they're artho. Artho means suffering. Artha. And then artha with an H. Artho, artharthi, those who are seeking personal benefits like money, prosperity. Jigyasu. Jigyasu means curious. It's a special form of the Sanskrit verb to know, gya, which means one who desires to know. One who desires to know is jigyasu. And the middle part of the word gya is the verb root from which you get jnanam. So, but that's just curiosity. It translates curiosity. So we've all had experience. You can tell someone about Krishna consciousness, or maybe they asked you about it, and they say, well, that's really interesting. So are you going to come back? I don't know. I was just curious. And now I satisfied my curiosity, just like you can, be curious. Like, what's the capital of Mongolia? Not generally well known. So then you can look it up and on your browser and then say, okay, now I know what the capital of Mongolia is. Do you plan to go there? No, I was just curious. So, and then finally, Jnani-cha Bharatarshava. There's the Jnani, someone who actually knows what's what. So the 4 kinds of people that approach Krishna, most of them, not only numerically 3 out of 4 classes, but those 3 classes are much bigger. And the fact that the other 3 classes, people that approach God or Krishna ignorantly, it's not ignorant because they've come to the right place, but it's ignorant in the sense they don't know who Krishna actually is. And this is stated again in the Bhagavad Gita. When Krishna says, Bahunam Janmanam Ante, at the end of many births, Bahu Janma Ante, Bahunam Janmanam Ante Jnanavan, which means exactly the same thing as Jnani, just a different suffix to the word Jnana. So Jnanavan Mam Prapadyate, the one who has knowledge surrenders to me. Bahunam Janmanamante Jnanavan Mam Prapadyate, because they know Vasudeva Sarvam. Vasudeva is everything. Iti. And Vasudeva Sarvam Iti Samahatmasu Durlabha. And that great soul is very hard to find. So not only is the number of people who come to Krishna because they actually know what they're doing, not only is that only one of 4 categories of people that come to Krishna, it's not that all the categories have the same number of people. That 1 out of 4 categories is the tiniest of all the categories. So, coming to a temple to see Krishna is a good thing. Krishna says it's sukrita, or it makes you sukriti, someone who's doing good, but it's ignorant. And you're not actually understanding the real purpose. So therefore, we can build a temple and thousands of people can come, but how many know what the heck they're doing? How many of them actually know what they should be doing? How many of them really understand who Krishna is? So I mentioned the point of, so there's philosophical atheism, which most people are not. There are very few people who are actually that silly as to be philosophical atheists. But there are people. So philosophical atheism means I don't believe in God. I believe there's no God. That's my philosophy. Psychological atheism means that you ostensibly say, okay, I believe in God, but I'm not going to let that interfere with my life. In other words, I come to see the deity not because I love Krishna, but because it's to my advantage. So what I really love is the benefits I think I'll get, which is, there's very difficult to find a stock today or some financial instrument that'll give you the same rate of return as people believe they'll get by giving something to the deity. It's just the best rate of return available right now. So psychological atheism means in my daily life, as I go about my life, God is not the most important thing in my life. I'm the most important thing in my own life. My family is the most important thing. Or other things are most important, like winning a cricket match. Or, who did you bet on for the Super Bowl? Some people actually pray to God for a particular, actually, in America, probably very large numbers of people pray to God for their team to win. So you can be a philosophical theist, but psychologically, in terms of what's most important to you, it's not God. God is a means to an end. And the end is what is actually important to me, not God. And if there was some other way to get the same result, I'd probably do that. So getting back to the point, Prabhupada said he came to establish a Brahmana class to put a head on the headless social body. The present problem is that society is a headless body, but ISKCON is a disembodied head. In the sense that, so what is the body? Let's go back to the Virat Rupa, the universal form from the Rig Veda. And actually, the verse that describes the Virat Rupa is called the Purusha Sukta. Su means well, and ukta, spoken. So well-spoken praises, su-ukta, sukta. And the Bhagavatam explains that chapter of the Rig Veda in a chapter which Prabhupada calls Purusha Sukta Explained. That's why he titled that chapter in the second canto of the Bhagavatam. So, not everyone has to be a philosopher. Not everyone, but just like, let's say, in an army, most people in an army don't actually directly engage in combat. They don't actually fire weapons. They cook, they fix trucks, they fix weapons, they, all kinds of things, transport, logistics. So in a typical modern army, the number of people who are directly firing weapons is not most of the people in the army. So it's not necessary that everyone be a philosopher. That's just not going to happen. However, everyone can assist the effort. Everyone can assist the effort. In other words, we should not only build temples, which are necessary, they're necessary, we should build schools. Are the Vaishnavas in this country known as the best teachers? Are we thought of even by people who like what we do? People come to the temple. Are we just the people who provide beautiful rituals? Or are we the people that actually educate children, adult education, that empower the servants of Krishna to establish themselves as the natural teachers? Because the Brahmana class is the teaching class, not just the ritual class. And who says that? Krishna, in the Bhagavad Gita, in verses which somehow have escaped the notice of most people. For example, one verse which is very well known is 434. Just try to learn the truth by approaching the spiritual master. Tad vidhi. The verse begins with the Sanskrit word tat, which if you put an H is English, that. So if you begin a sentence by saying that, you should understand, the natural question is, well, what is that? So when Krishna says that, you should know, tad vidhi, what is he referring to? He's referring to the verse that he just spoke, and the verse that's going to come after also. But he's referring to the verse he just spoke, 433. So what did Krishna say that we should learn from people that know the truth? And in 433, Krishna says, Shreyan dravyamayat yagyat jnana yagya parantapa. Better than simply serving me with rituals is serving me through knowledge. There is dravyamayat yagya. Yajna or yagya, it's one of those words which has about 300 pronunciations in India. In Bengal, in East India, it's yoga. So anyway, it means an offering, an act of devotion to God. And Krishna says Shreyan. Shreyan is the comparative degree of the Sanskrit word Sri, like Sri Patelji or Sri Reddyji or something, and depending on what region you come from. And so, or Sri Chakravartiji. So Sri can mean beautiful, it can mean fortunate, it can mean, and all those things. But in Sanskrit, you can say very Sri, very Sri. And the word very Sri is Shreyan. It's just the comparative degree of the word Sri. And then, of course, there's Shrestha. So Krishna says Shreyan. He's making a comparison. Better than Dravyamayat Yajna. Yajna is an act of devotion and offering. And Dravyamaya. Maya means consisting of. This is not Maya, illusion. Those are long A's. This is with short A's, Maya. So dravya in Sanskrit means paraphernalia. It means a material object, a physical object, which serves as paraphernalia. So a dravya maya yajna is an act of devotion and offering, like in the temple, where, let's say, you offer incense. Incense is dravya. A lamp, deepa, is dravya. Water is dravya. A cloth is dravya. The fan is dravya. And so it is a yajna, it is an offering which consists of dravya. And Krishna says there's something better than this. There's something more important than this. And that is jnana yajna, an offering that consists of education, of learning, of knowledge, educating yourself and educating other people. And Krishna says that is better. And then he explains why it's better. Because he says, Krishna says, sarvam karma, all actions or all duty. Here karma means duties. The word karma has various meanings in the Bhagavad Gita. So Krishna says, sarva karma, all actions, all duties, akhilam, without exception. So this is very exception. Every duty without exception. Sarvam karmakilang parta jnane parisamapyate. Every duty, without exception, culminates in knowledge. So even if you perform the Dravyamaya Yajna, the puja, which we should do, I mean, it's not that we shouldn't do it, but it's just like when you wake up in the morning, you drink water, you also eat food. It's not that, oh, food is more important, so don't ever drink water. So some things are necessary, but not sufficient. Puja is necessary, but insufficient. Because Krishna says, parisamapyate, it culminates. The purpose of it is to understand. A puja, for example, is not an end in itself. It's not that if you come to the temple and you do a puja in whatever state of consciousness, that's great. No. The whole point of doing the puja is to understand that Krishna is God and I am a servant of God. That's the whole point of it. It culminates. The puja without the understanding is an empty ritual. How do I say that? Because it's in the Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam says, verses I think seldom cited, but the Bhagavatam says that, and Lord Chaitanya said, this is our most important Shastra, that archayam eva. Archa in Sanskrit means puja, deity worship. Archa-vigraha, the deity form. So archayam means in archa, in deity worship. Archayam eva. Archayam eva shraddhaya pujam yakshraddhayehate. One who undertakes to worship the Lord, but only in the temple with archa. Archayam eva haraye. That's what, unto the Lord, unto Hari. Archayam eva haraye pujam yakshraddhayehate. A person who undertakes to puja, to worship the deity with faith. But archayam, but only in archayam. And natad bhakteshu. And that person does not worship Krishna in the hearts of the devotees. In other words, I worship Krishna in the temple. I don't have to treat other people properly. I don't have to care about them. And what these people don't understand is that every living body is a Krishna mandir. So if you think that Krishna is only, of course, we come to this mandir to practice, because this is the easiest place. I mean, even a fool can see Krishna here. So we come here because this is where Krishna makes himself most easily visible. But you come to the temple to see the deities, not to get some material benefit, but so that to practice, so that when you walk out of the temple, you can see the deity everywhere else. Archayam eva haraye pujang jakshadhayehate. But if someone does not see the deity in the devotees, and natad bhakteshu cha anyeshu, and in other living beings. In other words, this is a temple here. This is a mandir. Radha Kalachandji mandir. But every living body is a Radha Kalachandji mandir. And so just as if someone comes here and misbehaves, does not behave properly in front of the deity, everyone knows that's an offense. But if we mistreat anyone, we are offending the deity, because that same deity is in everyone's heart. So a person who only can see God in the archa vigraha, what does the Bhagavatam say about that person? Sabhakta prakrita smritaha. That person is acknowledged to be a bhakta, a devotee, but what kind of devotee? Prakrita, a materialistic devotee, not liberated, not on the spiritual platform, on the material platform. So again, Krishna says that the best service, not the only service we do, but the best service is education. Of course, we have a great school here. Where's Nritya? Take a bow. Nritya is an excellent devotee, and she loves it when I praise her in front of everyone. She actually pays me on the side to do this. Just kidding. She'd rather I didn't do it. But so there is an excellent school here. Where's the adult? We need adult education. Where are the seminaries? So we can train devotees to get master's degree, doctorate degree and teach in universities. Prabhupada said in 1975 in Los Angeles that if the devotees could teach Krishna consciousness in universities, that would save America. He would save America and save the world if we could simply become the recognized teachers of society. So that's where the emphasis has to be. Of course, it's not that we neglect the deity. There's no question of neglecting the puja. But the ultimate goal, Krishna says, of the puja is to understand, to get knowledge, and then to teach that knowledge to others. And when we do that, we will actually fulfill Prabhupada's purpose. Otherwise, as we know, the world, to use the cliche, is going to hell in a handbasket. I mean, when they take polls, you have to be a really, really big fool to think the world is going well. I mean, you have to basically live under a rock to think that the world is going well. And so the question is not, why are these politicians such, we know what they are. The real question is, where are the Vaishnavas? Where are the Vaishnavas when the world most needs them? Oh, they're doing rituals. They haven't got time for the world. So the actual qualification of a saintly person is titikshava, tolerant, karunika, merciful, suhridak sarva dehinang, and the well-wishing friend of every creature. So how many of us can say that in my practical actions, in my daily behavior, I am truly acting as the dear friend of everyone? That I'm truly concerned with the fate of the world. I'm doing everything in my power to teach Krishna consciousness or to help others teach. Or, I do a ritual once a week. So this is, you could say this is doer prema, tough love. But the point is all of us have to do soul searching, not just you. I have to ask myself, am I really doing the very best I could do? Sure, I stop in a temple, I give a talk, I have the pleasure of, making everyone feel bad. But, one of those refined pleasures in human life. But actually, every one of us has to ask, am I really dedicated to the well-being of all living entities? Because that's the definition of a saintly Vaishnava, suhridam. By the way, the Sanskrit word suhrit, well-wisher, is in English. I don't know if you know that. Because Sanskrit su, which means good, came to English through Persian and Greek as eu, and as in euphonics or eugenics or euphemism. It means good. So that in English, the EU, meaning good, is just Sanskrit su. And hrit is just heart, obviously. That's not linguistic. You don't have to be a great linguist to understand that. So suhrit means literally having a good heart. Just like you care for your children. You do everything in your power to help your children. Well, what about Krishna's statement in the Gita that I'm the father of everyone? Pitaham asya jagato. I'm the father of this universe. So if Krishna is the father of this universe, if you believe that, you also have to believe that everyone in the world is your family. So do you care about your family? So we have to apply to ourselves. We have to have enough character, enough sincerity, enough self-honesty to really ask ourselves, am I doing everything in my power to spread the knowledge? The knowledge. Or is it ultimately just about rituals? And that's a question we have to ask for ourselves. The Indian population, for example, in America, is a force to be reckoned with. They hold many prominent positions. It's perhaps the most highly educated ethnic community in the country. They become governors, heads of the biggest corporations. Everywhere you look, people from a Hindu background are excelling. And so we also have to excel as teachers. It doesn't mean you have to be a teacher and give up your day job. But it's just like, for example, if someone can't go out and give out books, you can sponsor book distribution. If you can't literally come here and be a pujari, you can sponsor the puja. But the main thing we have to do is sponsoring education. And the Vaishnavas should be famous in America as the best teachers, having the best schools. But that depends on all of us. So I will be kinder than you suspected and actually stop here. So so perhaps we have time for questions? Thank you all for taking it. Yes.
Thank you, Maharaj, for this wonderful class. So to me, it appears that basically it's encouraging everyone to become the teachers if they can.
Or to support teachers.
Or support teachers, and then teach, which is the lakshana of a brahmana, you know. Now, are there any instances where Srila Prabhupada emphasized also about being a kshatriya and other classes too?
Well, in the modern world, the only way you can be a kshatriya is if you become a shudra. Because to be a kshatriya, you have to, let's say you serve in the military. You have to serve under some corrupt, lower than shudra politician. Well, actually, in a sense, the same is true in universities. You have to, sing for your supper to get a job in a university also. But, so I would say if someone has a kshatriya propensity, then that person can get involved in management or public education. In other words, do what they can. But to become a fighter nowadays, you have to be in military, and then you have to take orders from politicians, so it's a little complicated.
Did Srila Prabhupada emphasize on that too, Maharaj?
No, he
emphasized.
He didn't say we got to put arms on the body. I mean, the American military has enough arms. They have more arms than Narayan. So the real need is to support education. So, any other question? What was that? Child wants to ask a question? What does that say? Nothing is? Oh.
Thank you very much, Maharaj. That was an incredible class, as always. You mentioned about this neophyte stage of being a materialistic devotee. Is it required, in order to make it back to the kingdom of God, to step up to another category of devotee?
Well, yeah. There are no social promotions to the spiritual world. Where the child, is promoted to the next grade, even though the child flunked all the tests, just because if the child were flunked, it might impact their self-esteem or something. So yes, I mean, anything you do for Krishna, worshiping Krishna, of course, you get credit. But ultimately, how can you go back to the spiritual world if you don't even know that other people are souls? And actually realize that, not just, okay, if I take a test, I'll check the box. Are people souls or refrigerators or, no, they're souls. So, because Krishna directly says, someone who's not interested, and it's not a question of preaching, going out on the street with a bullhorn. The real point is you just care about people. You care about people. Why? Because you see that Krishna is inside their heart. So if I don't care about people, and I don't see, what am I going to do in the spiritual world when I haven't even learned the ABCs, that everyone is a soul, everyone is part of Krishna, Krishna's in everyone's heart? What am I going to do in the spiritual world? So, yes, we do have to come to this advanced understanding. And again, you don't have to, if you're not a teacher by nature, or if you are busy taking care of your family or whatever, it's not that everyone has the time or facility or even inclination to literally go out and, let's say, be a teacher in a school or something. But everyone can help. Everyone can help. Everyone can do what they can to support this most important devotional service, according to Krishna and according to Prabhupada, which is to educate the world. So, anything else? Yes?
Hare Krishna. Maharaj, thank you for the wonderful class. I have one very basic question. We use the word Vedic civilization, Vedic literature so much, but we don't have access to the actual four Vedas. We talk about Bhagavatam and Gita, so why is it that so?
Well, because the four Vedas aren't so relevant in this age. Most of the times Krishna mentions the Vedas and Bhagavad Gita, he mentions them negatively. For example, Krishna tells Arjuna that Trigunya Vishaya Veda Nis Trigunya Bhavarjuna, that the subject matter, Vishaya here means the subject matter. The subject matter of the Vedas is Trigunya, material life. Life in the three gunas. And he says, Nis Trigunya, rise above that. And then he says, and this is like a really funny pun if you know Sanskrit. Krishna says, Tada, when you really understand, then Gantasi Nirvedam, you will go Vedaless. That when you really understand, literally, you will go Vedaless. So what does he mean there? First of all, Veda, Nirveda, Vedaless, can mean simply like without knowing or not caring about something, like I don't even want to know about it. It means indifferent, but also means literally without the Vedas. Tada Gantasi, you will go Vedaless. Shrotavyasya shrutasya cha. And then another pun. Krishna says you will be indifferent or Vedaless to all that is to be heard and all that has been heard. Shrotavya means to be heard, and Shruta, heard. So obviously that's Shruti. He's talking about Shruti. So Shrotavya is Vedic mantras that you're supposed to listen to. And Shruta is Vedic mantras you've already heard. And Krishna says that when you actually understand, you won't care about those things. Why? Because those mantras are about material life. But then finally, Krishna says in verse 15 in the Bhagavad Gita, Vedaischa sarvair aham eva vedyu, that ultimately I alone am to be known by all the Vedas. Although on the surface they don't talk about that, but that's ultimately the real point. Or Krishna says in chapter 9 of the Gita, that rāja-vidyā somapa sutta puta papa, the soma drinkers. The soma drinkers, somapa, the soma drinkers, is a direct reference to those who perform the soma yajna, which is the great sacrifice of the Rig Veda, where you produce this sort of heavenly beverage called soma. And so soma pa are those who have done the Rig Veda sacrifice and then drink the soma. Interestingly, today, scholars don't actually know what plant it was made from. And so they actually don't know what it's made from. In fact, it's called soma sava. We know it's from a plant because you press out the soma. You press out the soma to get this liquid. And therefore to do something 3 times, because in the great Rig Veda sacrifice, the soma was pressed out 3 times, so they call it trisavam, the 3 pressings, which means you do things 3. Anyway, too much information. So, but Krishna says, rāja-vidyā, those who study the 3 Vedas, which are the Rig Veda, Sama Veda, and Yajur Veda. The Atharva Veda is left out because it has some portions that are kind of like Vedic voodoo. Like if you want to get your neighbor, put a curse on your neighbor. So the Atharva Veda was not as respectable as the other Vedas. So that's why, someone's called Trivedi. And that's why Krishna says rāja-vidyā, one who studied the 3 Vedas. Tri-vidyā somapa puta papa, freed of their sins. Yagyayars swargam prarthayanti, they aspire to go to Swarga, the material heaven. But then kshine punye martya lokam vishanti. When their punya is exhausted, punya is sort of like, think it as an ancient Vedic credit card. You know, you can go to some like amusement park or something like that, a restaurant, and you're buying everyone, okay, the meal is on me. But then once your credit card starts saying, no more credit, or purchase rejected, they throw you out. So you're only good as long as your credit card is still valid, or as long as you have money in your. So it's just like that. Kshine in Sanskrit means exhausted. Kshine punye. So you get punya points. Punya is piety. You see this in the story of Yati. It's all over in the Shastras that you perform sacrifice, do pious activities, give charity, whatever, buy vegan Girl Scout cookies, and you pile up punya points. You get punya credits, and then those credits take you to the higher planets. And when your credits exhausted, they it's like throw the bum out. And so Krishna says that this is not the point. So almost every reference in the Bhagavad Gita to the Vedas is a little negative and critical. And Krishna associates it with material life. The term Vedic, very quickly, and then I'll end, because that's it's very interesting to see how the word Vedic is used in Shastra the same way mundane scholars use it. Not so much the way we use it. Vedic, and we have the word in Sanskrit, Vaidik. Even making an adjective out of a noun, Vedic, is Sanskrit. So the word Vedic is only used in the Bhagavatam, Vaidika, to talk about Shruti literature as opposed to Tantrika literature, which is a literature which is Smriti literature. So it's only used in that technical sense in the Bhagavatam. The word Vedic in the Chaitanya Charitamrita is used in an even more restricted way. It only refers to, you find it in the phrase Vaidika Brahmana, a Vedic Brahmana, which means a karmakandi, ritualistic, materialistic Brahmana. So using the word Vedic as an all-encompassing term to mean the highest entire civilization is something which we do. We talk about Vedic culture. It's not that it's wrong, it's just not the traditional usage. But anyway, there's much more we could say. So maybe I'll end here for now. And thank you all for your attention. And Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So, Maharaja ki jai.